Broadcasting from somewhere beneath the New York Public Library, it's Brian and Eric Don't Belong Here. Hello to everybody listening. I am one of your hosts, Brian, here with my handsome, incomparable colleague, Eric. Eric, what is going on, my friend?
Holy mackerel!
Coming in real hot on that one. Excited for this
every
one.
time. Very excited. This is a crazy... I feel like we got a big one on this one.
This is... I'm so nervous about people listening to this one and then thinking that this is a smart show. Because...
Don't want to mislead them.
This is a very dumb show that has a very smart person on. Eric, would you mind telling everyone listening a little bit about our guest?
Sure. So Brian Johnson, who is our guest this evening and who we're honored to have on, raised the average IQ points in this room by about like 300 points on his own. But so this guy is a fascinating character. He's a translator. He's a independent researcher. He's an editor. He does some work in the tabletop RPG space, which is pretty cool.
He wouldn't teach me Magic Missile.
He would not teach you magic. Asked.
He tried. He said he doesn't know. I don't believe him.
That's right. So we wanted to have him on this evening. He actually just released a new project called Necromancy in the Medici Library. And so one thing that Brian specializes in is actually translations of medieval and Renaissance grimoires from their original language. These are literal books of magic from medieval times. That he teams up with people and translates. He knows ancient Greek, ancient Latin, German. He's just an accomplished, interesting cat, and he tells us all about it.
And he's a super nice guy, and was super patient with two fucking ding dong dum dums.
Yeah,
just being
he
like,
really
so how does magic
walked
work?
us through it. Yeah, there was a point where he was like, oh, so like he sort of understood that we had no idea what we were talking about. I think normally people who find him are pretty like deep into this stuff in the deep end. We were very much in the shallow end. We have water wings on. We're just flailing around.
Doing our best.
Yeah.
I guess nothing to it but to do it.
Yeah, let's roll in. So for listeners who might not know about you or know what you do, can you give just like a brief background on kind of who you are? You're a freelancer, you're a translator, you do all sorts of stuff. But what's the overview on Brian Johnson?
Yeah, I basically just do whatever I can do to make a living. But
Yeah.
Oh, that
yeah,
hit
as
home.
as far as probably why I'm on this show, starting out as just kind of a hobby, really. I've always been interested in kind of esoteric, occult, supernatural things. Ever since I was a little kid reading the Greek mythology books from the local public library. But yeah, as I got kind of more seriously into the academic side of it, I started coming across sources that I wanted to be able to have access to and read for myself that I found had never been translated or possibly even made available in a printed edition. So I also around the same time when doing this kind of research, I found that a lot of these had been digitized, the original manuscripts, by whatever library they were currently held by. So I just kind of started going about transcribing and translating them into English, and started finding some things that I thought were pretty interesting, and I thought other people might want access to them too. So I found a publisher that was willing to go along with it.
And is that Hadean Press?
They were the first one that I worked with, and I've worked with several times since then. And they do really good production work. Yeah.
What are the contents of these documents that you're translating?
Well, different things. More or less, they are all what you might call a grimoire of one kind or another. The very first one I worked on was a version of what's called the Testament of Solomon, which is it kind of it's kind of the meeting point of the later medieval grimoires with some of the earlier Christian apocrypha. It's kind of a story about King Solomon that nobody wanted to include in the Bible.
Okay.
It's about how he coerced a bunch of demons into helping build the temple in Jerusalem.
What? That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, it's pretty cool.
I maybe would have paid more attention in Catholic school.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of crucial things that kind of left out.
Leave in the demons next time.
Yeah. Interesting. So that's where, I mean, I guess we can go down that rabbit hole, but that's the connection to a lot of grimoires, right? Are these like Solomonic practices and from this story?
I understand we're still in overview mode. I'm still looking at all the rabbit holes. Like, can we go down this? Eric, look at this rabbit hole. Let's go
there's
here.
a lot we can talk about for sure.
I'll back up off the microphone for a minute.
No, but there's a lot of folklore across Jewish, Christian, and Islamic folklore, mythology, whatever you want to call it, about how a big part of the special wisdom that was bestowed upon King Solomon by God involved his knowledge of the natural world and also kind of the invisible world of spirits and the divine authority that he was granted over all of that. And a lot of these later grimoires, the Testament of Solomon, the later versions of the called the Key of Solomon, are basically they're presented as records of this special knowledge that he had that later practitioners could make use of.
Do basically, Brian, all of the grimoires in the Western occult tradition, do they all come from kind of the Key of Solomon, from these Solomonic practices, or are there different sort of?
Oh, there are certainly different ones. They very often do kind of name check Solomon in one way or another, but no, there are a lot of different branches in that tree. A lot of material can actually probably be traced back to some of the astrological and also jinn-based magic that was translated from Arabic in Spain in the 13th century, which doesn't make explicit or direct reference to the Solomonic tradition.
Fascinating. Brian, I don't want to cut. I know you're like chomping at the bit. Like
I have so many questions. No, please, cool. Yours will be better.
Well, I was just gonna ask. So I know there's also some tradition. Like so our overview at this, right, is in our show we just cover a broad range of topics in the strange and the occult and the weird. A personal pet interest of mine that was really cultivated by listening to shows like Glitch Bottle is just sort of like the historical and the real cultural roots of magical practice and the Western occult tradition. So I do have some just like nerdier kind of personal selfish questions that I want to ask you about while we have you here. I guess one of them is, how did all of these different strands kind of mix in? Because I've glossed very briefly over stuff like, the Greco-Egyptian papyri and things like that. Is there an Egyptian and even like Babylonian influence on these kind of practices? Or are they purely sort of like Islamic, Judeo, like Abrahamic?
I think it's fair to say that there almost certainly is a connection to things like the Greek Egyptian papyri. It's extremely difficult to trace exactly how that comes in, but we do know that there was a movement to translate a lot of Greek language material into Arabic in the between say the 7th and 10th century approximately, and at the same time that the Arabic astrological and occult tradition was at the same time receiving input from East Indian astrology, occultism. Um, yeah, and there are even I don't I can't speak to the historicity of any actual influences, but I've even noted at least parallels in a lot of the esoteric Buddhist material with later Arabic and then later Western grimoire practices, which I think is really fascinating.
Yeah, super.
Um,
I remember listening to an interview with Dr. Steven Skinner actually talk, because I think he does some feng shui work, and I think he lives in Asia currently, and talking about, I hope I'm not messing up this anecdote, but how like there are like local Chinese wizards effectively who still operate today, who have like registers of spirits and are basically doing like indigenous grimoire type of work, but it's like a totally different lineage and tradition, but very similar to what you see in Western European traditions.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in a modern day Taoist practice,
Yeah,
I believe,
that's right.
and in many uh, regions of China and elsewhere, there's a lot of cross fertilization between Buddhism and Taoism and
For sure.
indigenous local practices.
Incredible. So I feel like we're getting super into the scholarship weeds.
Tag me in when I can learn how to cast magic missile.
Yeah, me too.
Exactly. Well, one of the things I think that really drew us to you too is both Brian and I. Brian is an amazing DM and introduced me to D&D and tabletop games. And I know you do work in that realm too, so that could be interesting for us to talk about. Maybe we should back up for a second, just because we're not so well versed in it, and our audience may not be as well. Like, what is a what does a grimoire tell you how to do? What even is a grimoire?
Sure. And again, it depends a little bit from one book to another,
Sure.
but more or less, it's an instruction manual for doing one kind of magic or another, which could be anything from knowing when and what kind of materials to use to make an astrological talisman, or it could be an elaborate ritual to constrain a demon to do whatever you want them to do.
Okay, now we're talking.
Yeah.
Now we're talking.
And yeah, like
Do you have a copy of that one?
well, yes. I mean, I translated one.
What just can I go down that rabbit hole first? What is that process of translating something like that like? Where do you even start with something like that?
Sure. I like to focus, as I said, especially on materials that have never been translated before. Often don't even have any kind of a printed edition. So what I'm typically doing is once I've identified and located one of these, uh, I get on the library's website and go into their digitized manuscript interface, and then just kind of page by page transcribing the original handwriting into my own notebook so I can read it myself. And then going back line by line and making reference to a dictionary more or less frequently to translate it into some kind of readable English.
Wow.
What kind of languages are we talking about here?
Well, I've done work in medieval Greek, also Latin, and most recently some 18th century German.
Wow.
Those are so I've pulled off the hat trick. I've managed to translate a grimoire in all three languages that I'm actually able to read.
There you go. There you go.
That's crazy. And are you just self-taught in those?
I took German in high school. I took a year of Greek which the Greek that I studied in college was actually Koine Greek, which is more like first century BC AD rather than medieval, which is it's still close enough that the grammar still makes sense. But a lot of the vocabulary had changed by then, some of the spelling.
Sure.
And Latin, I actually did spend a summer before grad school kind of giving myself a crash course in. But you know, a lot of this has deteriorated over time, so there's a lot of kind of brushing up and teaching myself with every new project.
That makes sense.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I don't have a question. Do you have a question?
Interesting. Well, I'm just the thing that's coming to mind. So I took Latin and Greek in high school, and I remember literally nothing. So that is insane to me that you took like a year of it and you're able to go in and translate these like esoteric texts and read. I mean, you're a brilliant guy. That's crazy.
Well, like I say, it's the main thing is that the grammar stuck with me. So it's like I can tell what a word is doing in a sentence. I might not know what the word is, but like I always say, that's what the dictionaries are for.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
Very interesting.
I always think translation in all mediums is interesting. Of the amount of I can't think of a quite like a. Never mind. We'll cut that out.
Sure.
I can't construct the thought.
I'm
really on the dumb train here.
It is. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say, I agree. Translation is fascinating.
Yes. End of thought.
Cut that one for social. We got it. No, we actually. I was perusing some of your work, Brian, and you have a very interesting essay. It actually might be about. I forget which project it's in reference to, but you're talking about the sort of the tension of translation, where it's like you can either preserve just the original language exactly as it is and let the reader sort of immerse themselves in the strangeness and the foreignness of that, or try to what you said, and this is a brilliant term, like domesticate it and bring it into sort of more modern, familiar parlance. And I think you said in this essay that you prefer the former, that you prefer to leave it just as it is and let the reader encounter it sort of in the original format as much as possible. Is that roughly right? Yeah.
Yeah, more or less. It's like without doing like just a mechanical word by word translation. I just, but I do try to present the. I guess I try to present the language in a way that would have been meaningful to the original author as well, while still being comprehensible to a modern English speaker.
Sure.
Like as far as like technical terminology and things like that or often with the grimoire work, the also ecclesiastical terminology, keeping that as close to the original as possible.
Got it. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Have you stumbled on any just very strange or kind of like alien concepts, magical or otherwise, while I feel like you're dredging stuff up from a very different world.
Has anything made you do a double take?
Yeah. It's like I've over the years become pretty familiar with this kind of stuff, so it's in and of itself isn't that weird to me anymore. But working on some of the translation of the codex from the Medici library, the last one that I've published, I found some weird combinations of material, and they're like a ritual for what you might call a love spell that combined the more ritualistic Solomonic kind of demon conjuration, along with some of the more simplistic kinds of sympathetic magic that you find in like folk traditions. And then in other parts, it it involves a lot more of the technical astrological knowledge that you don't typically find in the works of conjuration beyond paying attention to what phase the moon is in or something like that. It goes into significantly more detail, which it kind of struck me as being more familiar with the some of the Arabic tradition, possibly.
I have a big, crazy, complicated thought that I'm going to try to articulate, probably do a very bad job. And I'm also going to hope it's relevant to what we're talking about. But it was, you mentioned a love spell in that. And those are interesting because we keep seeing those come up. And it seems it is a thing throughout, it seems, all of human history. Everyone's like, how do I hack this? And you see it across what seems to be different, even magical traditions or areas or like regions of magic, right? And I'm wondering if that relates to translation in any way. Are these different traditions, these different areas, fucking with the same kind of magical elements across these? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean that's something I can definitely confirm that from East Asia to the Latin speaking West, the ends and means of magic are very, very similar. I mean, often it might just come down to a difference in like what plants and animals are available is about the only difference.
Sure.
They're being used in just about the same way. But yeah, sex, money, and health are the perennial purposes that people went looking for magic to secure for themselves.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, I was actually I found it kind of amusing when looking up some of this stuff, like how much magic is concerned with finding hidden or buried treasure somewhere.
Yep.
There's a lot, It's not even like a good business idea or what. It's just like find the gold that's in the ground already.
Eric, that's what we should be doing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, before the modern period, that's how people protected their wealth. I mean, there weren't banks, and there was
just the ground, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you were a lot more likely to have your village sacked and burned down by a roving band of marauders. So any not any non-fungible wealth that you might have, the safest thing to do was bury it under your house and hope that you could come back for it later.
Put it in the hole.
And if you didn't, if you didn't, someone else might conjure a demon and go looking for it.
Well, there you go. This village does not carry cash, coins, or jewels.
That's right.
Please do not pillage.
That's right. Please just don't dig up everything. I have a very nice garden bed out back. Do not dig that up. Brian, so it seems like a big focus in people who are interested in like the Western esoteric tradition are these grimoires is like the sort of demon summoning piece of it, which I think we should definitely talk about because that's kind of super fascinating. But what is kind of the anatomy of like the Western magical tradition? Like you've got divination, you've got demon evocation. What else are if I'm a 13th century magician, like what other practices am I engaged in? What's in my toolkit?
I mean,
and do I have a sick beard?
Probably.
Okay.
Unless you were a monk, then you'd be pretty clean shaven. And
Eric, you'd be kicked out of the monks pretty fast.
So fast.
Well, I mean, considering that a lot of the practitioners at the time were monks, you might not be.
Oh, interesting. All right.
Oh,
no beard for Eric.
Whoa. Can't grow one, so it's fine.
But I mean, yeah, that covers a lot of it. I mean, forms of divination, the whole spirit or demon, spirit, angel. They use different names, often probably to try to cover up what they were doing. that covers a lot of it because once you get a hold of a spirit to go send and do your bidding, that can cover a lot of different purposes. As I mentioned earlier, once the Arabic material started coming in, you do see more a, uh, 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 a greater awareness of ways of producing astrological talismans under suitable celestial conditions. Um, but yeah, that really does cover a lot of it. I'm not sure if you eh, if you had uh, uh, if there was more to that question besides just what they were doing, or
No, I feel like that was actually a terrible and sort of broad question. I get my my curiosity for this subject kind of gets my old cart in front of the horse a little bit sometimes. Tell me about the magic is basically what that kind of was.
So magic.
Yeah, magic, huh? Go. I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't mean to put you on the spot. No, that's a very comprehensive answer. I guess kind of what I'm getting at, right, is like I think like a lot of people, I don't know if you had this experience, but a lot of my interest in magic started with like exposure to things like video games and D&D and all that stuff, and being like, oh wait, this was a real thing, that like there were, and to an extent are, literal wizards. What do they actually do? And one of the things that in just like my very cursory scholarship and research, it's like, oh, pretty much it's like you're not quote unquote casting a fireball. You're working through these almost like arcane phone books and calling up the guy who can do the thing for you.
Al's fireballs.
Yeah.
Give me a call.
Yeah, exactly. Literally. Is that more or less right? Like you're working, most of the Western magical tradition is working through entities to achieve some kind of end that you couldn't on your own.
that's definitely a lot of it. Yes.
Yeah.
And there are also things like what's typically classified as sympathetic magic,
Mm-hmm.
where performing some kind of operation on a an image or other representation of the target that you want to affect, uh, under the assumption that basically like affects like,
Mm-hmm.
uh, harming or otherwise influencing an image of the person or thing that you want to influence, will affect that thing, uh, which is another perennial practice that is found all over the world since prehistory.
For sure. For sure. And I guess there are, in addition to the rituals for like demon or entity conjuration and communication and whatever, I suppose there are fairly complex rituals and things for these sort of like effects, like sympathetic magic kind of operations, I guess.
I mean, they can be.
Yeah.
Those that you find in actual grimoire text do tend to be more complicated, possibly only because uh, the more complex an operation is, the the more difficult it is to transmit just orally or by memory.
Right.
But at the same time, I think a lot of what that may not have been recorded, but that people were still almost certainly doing, was very simple. I mean, as things that we find things as simple, uh, especially in like later trial records. In the early modern witch trials, but also in some of the medieval inquisitorial records, things like just producing a little wax figurine of your neighbor who you were angry at, and suspending it over your hearth fire to slowly torture them to death.
All right.
Seems mean.
Yeah, but just things as simple as that, really.
Right. Interesting. I want to put Brian. Do you have any? Are there any byways we want to go? I feel like we can go in a million different directions from here.
I'm fascinated by all of this, but I am along for the ride.
Nice. Yeah, me too. I mean, this is such a privilege, man, to be able to kind of do a deep dive into some of the scholarship with you. I guess I have to ask, if it's not too vulgar and if it's appropriate. One thing we do like to ask each other all the time and ask our guests is like, check in on kind of where you are at with this stuff in terms of your own level of belief. I know there are scholars who study this stuff who are like, oh, of course, it's just, the people from the past misinterpreting things, and other people who are straight up practitioners. And obviously Alexander F on Glitch Bottle has a lot of people on who are practitioners. Do you dabble in any of this stuff? What's your kind of take on it?
I do. I have never really had, I guess, the need to attempt any of the really, elaborate conjurations, that kind of thing. But I've actually gotten more use out of the astrological talismans and that kind of thing. I've I've just through cross-referencing things like the Picatrix, which is a translation of what you might call an Arabic. It's probably the closest thing to an Arabic grimoire that has come down to us in the West. Just for things like, business.
Yeah.
And
well, you got us, so it's got to work. Maybe not at all.
What I like to say is I was able to start a successful business during a pandemic lockdown, so something must be working.
There you go. You mentioned astrological talismans.
Yeah.
What are the details of those, and like how have you found those effective, or how might someone find those effective?
Sure. It's basically it's producing an image, which could be, many of the original texts, prescribe inscribing or casting an image in some type of precious metal that in some way corresponds to the planet or astrological sign that the influence of which you are trying to invoke. I typically draw them on paper cards using an appropriate color if I'm able to.
Got it.
It's honestly, it's very off the cuff when I do it.
Sure.
But yeah, producing a resonant image that evokes the influence of the planet that you are working with. During an appropriate during appropriate astrological circumstances, basically, when the planet you're working with is it's without trying to get into too much of the terminology, when it is in a beneficial aspect with other planets and in a sign where it's happy, more or less.
Okay.
And when you say beneficial aspect, does that just mean in a specific position, like a specific?
Yeah. And all of this is looking at the planets from the perspective of planet Earth looking out. So it's not so much where they actually are in the sky, but where they look like they are from our perspective. Which is how astrology has been done since prehistory.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, just looking at making sure that n- nothing is nothing is interfering with or negatively impacting the celestial influence that you're trying to connect with.
Got it.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, I feel like we're always looking for. Brian is on a quest to summon a demon.
Someday,
which
someday, baby.
which I am terrified to participate in. But I think we're always looking for smaller, I shouldn't say smaller, but just ways to begin to experiment with some of this stuff that are maybe more manageable for beginners.
Yeah,
That
and
makes no
I think
mistake, it's meant to build up to the most irresponsible level.
but yeah, I think the astrological methods are much more accessible to most people. They don't require all of the paraphernalia. Although they do have probably a greater investment in well, I guess not so much a time investment, but an investment in learning how to uh, calculate the appropriate time to perform them.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah, one thing that was really interesting to me in starting to learn about all this stuff is the extent to which time and the calendar is so that there are specific days and specific hours within the day with which to say certain entities like hold an office or have domain or things like that, which was so precise and I had no idea about all of that. That's really interesting. I don't know if you can comment at all about the sort of like temporal or chronological aspect to a lot of this work.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say, with certainty where
Yeah.
that comes from, but uh, I think it's a lot of it can probably be traced back to some of the Egyptian practices where the what are called decans. They're basically 10-degree divisions of the zodiac circle.
Uh-huh.
Were assigned different spirits that they that ruled over them, ruled during their ascent across the horizon line. Um, but at the same time, even going back to ancient Mesopotamia, we know that many of the gods, spirits were directly identified with different celestial bodies. So it's certainly not a new idea that that what is going on in the sky has a more or less direct influence on what kind of spirits you can get a hold of at a given time.
Interesting.
If it's cool to switch gears for a minute, I did reach out on Discord and see if anybody has any questions.
Oh, for sure.
Brian, does that sound all right?
Yeah, sure.
I think some of these are pretty interesting. David asks, what are the most common spells? But I think we covered that a little earlier with like sex, money, power.
Yeah.
Sound right? We have also from David, how complex are the rituals like usually? Do they like average out to a certain level of complexity?
I mean, as far as the kinds of conjuration rituals, what you find in the Latin Western grimoires, um, they tend to follow kind of a. I mean, there are always variations, but there's kind of a basic format that they follow where there's usually an initial period of some kind of personal cleansing or purification, which can be anywhere from like 3 days to a month of,
Interesting.
and it could be fasting. It might just be, don't have sex during this time.
Easy, done.
Yeah. Especially if you're a monk.
Yeah.
But like I say, they all differ. But
Wiki How just said light a candle.
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, period of purification. Um, typically, they start the ritual itself will start out by invoking, you know, God, the angels, to kind of grant authority and power to the operator, um, over whatever kind of, you know, spirits, typically characterized as demons, that they're going to be trying to influence. Paradoxically, after that, uh, the the magician will often go about calling in some of the more powerful demons that are that have authority over the lower demons that will actually be doing the job that they want done. Uh, and so it's basically working your way down through this this chain of command until you get to the peon demons that you are going to be trying to boss around.
Got it. So it's reverse AT&T customer service.
Yeah,
Yeah, kind of, honestly. It is. I mean, what's so interesting about it is like we think of this stuff, especially working with grimoires, as like pure black magic kind of satanic stuff. But if you're a magician working in this tradition, you're actually invoking the authority first of God and the angels and a very Christian kind of like celestial. That's your kind of stamp of authority. Is that more or less right? That's how a lot of these rituals
yeah,
work.
yeah, absolutely. It's it's, I mean, uh it's by virtue of being a, you know, quote unquote good Christian that this magic even works.
Mm.
As far as the people who wrote it were concerned. Um, yeah, the idea of the you know, pact with a, or selling your soul to a demon is very much a uh, I don't want to say it was never done, because there is evidence that it was done, but as far as a a common practice, it is very much just a, what do you want to call, you know, a slander
Mhm.
Got it.
by the authorities.
That
But
makes sense. You still
yeah.
see a lot of that
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, is there? I don't want to cut off the Discord.
What's that? Oh
Is
yeah,
there-
I have one more. I have one more good one from the Discord. This is from Scott. Are there any suspiciously specific spells, like spell to keep Glenn's chickens in his own damn yard?
well, I mean, not so much in the later grimoires, but in going back to antiquity, uh, like there have been archaeologically recovered, you know, curse tablets and
Sure.
invocation bowls that absolutely do name specific people that they're trying to
That's
curse.
hilarious.
Imagine we know, all evidence of these people have been erased to time. We have no knowledge of who they could be, except that one guy hated his fucking guts.
Yeah.
And that's all that exists now.
I feel like there is some pretty petty shit that has been preserved in time. Yeah.
What curses I think are fascinating. Are there any
Yeah.
surprising curses that you've ever come across?
Um,
Or are they usually the bog standard pain, death, dismemberment, misfortune?
yeah, I mean, it often it's not clear, or not explicit at least, exactly what is meant to happen to a person,
Mm.
but you know, sticking pins in a little wax effigy of them, they're not going to have a good time.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It-
that'll
yeah, it basically does just seem to be a matter of inducing some kind of physical pain until until they either it, it well, yeah, it's funny because you find that the same kind of methodology in a lot of the quote unquote love spells, where
Mhm.
you're basically torturing someone until they come to you and submit to you.
Oh,
Right.
cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brian and I have had a lot of discussions about like the ethical dimension of a lot of this stuff.
That is not what
Oh,
a Teen Vogue article said happens.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely do not recommend actually performing most of these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, but that guarantees I'm gonna do it. Maybe not the love spells; those are creepy. But I'm gonna do something bad.
Do you think on that so where we are kind of as a duo, right, is like my position on this, to tip my own hand, is like I feel like where there's smoke, there's definitely a little fire. Where there's a little bit of baby in this bathwater. Like I think there is a truth to some of this stuff, and if people all over the world have these very elaborate methods of communicating with and interacting with entities that are non-physical, maybe there's a chance that it's like there is an independent existence to those things, and there is some truth to that. And it's sort of like a Pascal's wager thing, where I'm like, I don't know if it's true or not, but if it is true, maybe you could get into a lot of trouble if you futz with it in the wrong way. Where I think of Brian, I don't know how to characterize your position as like chaotic neutral.
If I go too hard and suffer consequences, at least then I will know.
Yeah.
I will know definitively. I'll regret it.
Yeah.
But I will know.
Yeah, so I'm very intensely curious and fascinated by, but also a little like wary of this stuff, where I think Brian is a little more courageous than me and willing to charge right in. Do you think in your own experiences, are there dangers to these sorts of practices potentially?
I know people who would absolutely tell you there are, and would claim to have experienced those consequences themselves. I personally have not, because again, I don't really screw with the demons that much.
Yeah.
I just write about them.
Sure.
But so yeah, that's kind of my perspective. I guess I've never had the need to take that risk.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
That's kind of how I feel like it's the ROI might not be there for me in my current situation.
Yeah, if I was in a life and death situation, or someone I really cared about was, I very well might take that shot. But
yeah, I feel like you're certainly well equipped to do it if you want. I mean, just having studied and translated these texts, or like I feel like what you would do.
Yeah,
basically.
I know who to call.
Yeah.
I have a unrelated question, but one that I am interested in. In a lot of subcultures, there are, you look at tabletop role-playing games, for example, and there seems to be this cool subculture that is all interested in this thing. And there are a lot of dramas once you peel back the curtain. Also, duck hunting. There's a lot of drama over like the stamp, what duck goes on a stamp. Tons of drama. John Oliver did a piece on it.
Okay.
Are there any dramas in the magical spell and grimoire community?
Oh my God.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
I try not to get involved in it, and I'm certainly not going to name anyone's names.
Of course.
But yes, it is everything you would imagine. Yes.
Can you give like a 40,000 foot overview of some of the factions at play, or you without?
It's very much more a personal thing. Yeah.
This guy doesn't like that guy.
Yeah.
Are people like slinging curses and spells at each other? Is it
This
that
does
level?
seem
or
like a
just...
dangerous
Yeah,
community
I was
for there
gonna
to be
say,
beef.
yeah.
Probably. I mean, again, I can't say for certain, but very, very probably.
Amazing.
Oh God. I feel like we're gonna get hexed like 80 different ways when this episode
Oh,
drops.
please. We already have,
Yeah,
dude.
true. Fair point. Fair point.
But also, it meant people were listening.
Yeah, fair. Also true. 3 stars. We asked Brian. We have a policy on the show. We ask for just when people listen, just give us a working man's 3 stars. We don't need 5.
We don't need 5.
Just
It's
3.
unreasonable. This is a
You know?
3-star podcast. We know it. You know it. Everyone knows it.
That's right. That's fucking funny. That's really wild. It makes sense.
Makes sense. I buy it.
It makes sense.
So I know you mentioned you are not messing with this stuff that much yourself. You're just the translator. Hey, man, this is what it says. Do you know of any best practices or maybe a what not to do if things get like, is there a way to prevent things from getting dangerous if they were inclined to?
I mean,
I'm going to write it down and do the opposite.
I guess my best advice would be to follow the instructions as closely to the way they're presented as possible, because if someone took the trouble to write this stuff down, it probably worked for them. So that would be my advice.
That makes sense.
It is more likely that they would have taken the trouble to record it if they or someone they knew made it work.
Right.
That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. That's really interesting.
Noted. So don't follow the instructions and do your own thing and hope for the best.
Ugh,
Got it.
This is gonna end so badly.
It already has, brother.
If you're lucky,
yeah. Go ahead, Brian. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, and if you're lucky, nothing will happen.
Right.
Well, what fascinates
That's really what I'm backing up.
What fascinates me about this is like listening to, especially, I mean, I feel like I don't know if you've listened to any of the episodes of Dr. Steven Skinner on Glitch Bottle, but he's just, he's a very intelligent, accomplished guy and quite lucid and rational. And it's just like, yes, if you follow these rituals, like you will see a thing will materialize in front of you if you do it correctly. And he's like, I've seen it myself, which is just a mind blowing idea. I don't know. Have you encountered, or in your studies and scholarship and just working with the people you've worked with, have you encountered anything strange or out of the ordinary that sort of changed your worldview that you're willing to discuss?
It personally, in my own, phenomenological experience, I can't say that I've never seen a visible manifestation or that kind of thing. But again, my same refrain. I'm not really doing that kind of magic.
Yeah.
Which another part of it is simply I don't my present living circumstances don't really facilitate having my own personal ritual space to work in.
Yeah.
But I kind of lost my train of thought. But I've certainly had little serendipities and weird coincidences in my research process that it really is kind of hard to just chalk up to chance. Like,
sure,
finding a new finding a reference or a source that directly pertains to something I'm working on, but finding it in a place that it has no business being.
Interesting.
Yeah, I like to think that if nothing else, I like to think that the people whose books I'm translating might be giving me a little nudge to get their work back in the public domain.
Sure.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, even in the work, were you an editor or translator on the Testament of Solomon, that book?
Both. Yes, I translated I translated one version of it and then put together a little introductory essay, kind of trying to explain it.
And that's more or less the account of a gentleman in the 80s, right? Like going through the Lesser Key of Solomon and his work. Am I confusing the?
Oh, are you talking about Steve Savado's?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay, yes. Okay, yes. His forthcoming volume, that actually includes a different version of the Testament of Solomon.
Got it.
That yes, along with a record of his personal practice in the 80s. Yes, yes. I did some of the just a little bit of the kind of cleanup editing, proofreading for the reissue of that coming out from Hadean Press.
Oh, very
Got
interesting.
it. If someone were to listen to this show, find this whole just rabbit hole fascinating, and maybe wanted to explore down the paths you've explored, Brian, what would you recommend as like first steps of like for a complete novice, maybe delving deeper into this world?
There are a lot of in the past, 20, 25 years or so, there have been a lot of good scholarly treatments of this kind of material. There's a whole series of books from Penn State University Press. It's called the Magic and History series. It includes several printed translations or editions of original texts that people might want to look into. As far as if people want to look into doing their own translations of original material, again, I would say start with some of these scholarly texts, books, other publications. See what manuscripts are being cited in their footnotes, and look them up. See if there's been any work done on them. If not, what library they're held at. If it's been digitized. And it's just kind of a matter of going from there and seeing what hasn't been worked on yet, and what's available.
Fascinating.
Yeah, super interesting, Brian. If someone is just discovering you, I mean, your bibliography is wild. You've had so many projects and worked on so many books. What is I know we were talking a little bit on Twitter. I don't know if you can talk about it. I know you have a project coming out in a little bit, and your most recent what was your most recent book?
The most recent one published was the title is Necromancy in the Medici Library, which is an edition of the original Latin text with an English translation of of portions of a manuscript from the Biblioteca Medici Lorenziana in Florence, Italy, which was, as best I can tell from from historical records, was in the possession of the Medici family.
Wow.
Fascinating.
So necromancy, huh? Just like straight up necromancy?
Yeah, I mean, in both senses of the word, as it was used in the medieval and early modern period. So there's the literal sense of actual evoking ghosts to talk to them, and then there's the much broader sense of just black magic in general, which is kind of the sense it was more frequently used in the early modern period, as kind of just a shorthand derived from the original sense, mainly due to the fact that in the Christian worldview, people shouldn't really be able to talk to souls of the deceased. So if you thought you were doing so, it must really be a demon.
Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Got it.
So, sort of a little bit of a I guess historical aside or tangent, but how common? You mentioned that this manuscript was most likely within the Medici library. Like, how common was both the practice of this sort of thing and who was doing it? Like you were saying, like it was fairly common in monasteries, and monks were often practicing black magic inside of monasteries, which is wild. Like how the Medicis had theoretically stuff in their library. How widespread was this material and the practice of it, and who was doing it?
Well, as far as who was doing it, people who could read, which which at the time was largely going to be the clergy.
Yeah. I actually heard a fascinating anecdote. I don't know if this is accurate. Maybe you could confirm or deny it. That it was that lawyers, especially, were often involved in like black magic and evocation. Also, because so much of the language in like demonic evocation is kind of contractual. Also, you're like kind of crafting an agreement with them and binding them in a very specific way. I don't know if that's accurate though.
I mean, that as far as a description of what the operations are like, that is true. I'm trying to think. I don't know that I've come across any evidence of actual practice by jurists who weren't also in the clergy.
Got it.
But I certainly wouldn't dismiss it. But again, at the in the medieval and Renaissance period, I think many of the people who were practicing law most likely were would have been in the lower clergy, people who they wouldn't have been a celibate monk, but probably had taken some sort of a vow at some point, just it really in the course of their education.
Got it.
Interesting. So back to the original point, you were saying, so this is mostly practiced by folks who had some sort of level of literacy, including monks. And God, that's crazy. That's really wild to think of, like black magic happening inside of medieval monasteries across Europe.
Sure. And as far as to how common this actually was, it's really hard to say. All we have to go on are the relatively few surviving texts and things like trial records, where that often mention the accused being found to be in possession of these kinds of texts, which were most likely subsequently burned. But I think it's safe to say that it was not uncommon. Certainly, just given the number of these otherwise proscribed and often destroyed texts that have come down to us.
That's fascinating.
Very interesting.
I feel like there's a million questions we could ask. I don't know, Brian. Do you have any other?
I feel pretty covered.
Yeah.
I would, Brian. I hope you come back sometime, because we will definitely think of a million more questions.
Yeah, this is fascinating. Is there anything? Again, I know you're working on a lot of stuff. Is there anything coming out that you want to preview or
or promo or any place we should direct people?
I do have a couple very different projects currently in the works. I don't want to say too much. One of these is something I'm working on with a colleague of mine.
Mhm.
I can tell you in broad terms what it is. It's
Sure.
it'll be it'll be centered around a translation of a approximately 17th 18th century Faustian German grimoire.
All right.
Awesome.
Uh, and the other thing I have coming is a translation of some excerpts from a text from it's a 14th century Catalan Latin uh, a 14th century Latin text from Catalonia. That it the title is the Summa Sacrae Magicae, or the Summa of Sacred Magic, which is this gargantuan kind of systematic treatise of kind of Christianized magic, put together by a scholar named Berengar Ganel in the 14th century. And I've basically I've translated one little part of this that I found particularly interesting, dealing with some invocations of planetary spirits, which I think shows a very strong influence from some of the Arabic material that was coming into the Iberian Peninsula around that time.
Oh, that's
Very neat.
fascinating. Yeah.
Very cool.
When are those coming out? Do we know?
I do not have a precise date for either one of those, but I think it would be safe to say within the coming year
Hell yeah.
they
Very
should
cool.
be those should be appearing.
Nice. Well, we'd love when those do drop. We'd love to have you back on to talk about them if you'd be open to that.
I'd certainly be happy to.
That'd be great. And just for folks who are wondering who might want to work with you, like what are some of the professional services you offer, and how can people find you and get in touch?
Yeah, I'm mainly a freelance copy editor, proofreader. My website is just bjohnsonfreelance.com. I'm also you can also find me on Twitter at Joe Bry. It's just my first part of my last name juxtaposed with the first part of my first name, JOHBRI.
We'll have a link in the description too. All that.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyone if you need someone to help make sure that your prose is as clear and readable as possible, I would be happy to help with that.
Hell yeah.
Incredible.
Brian, thank you so much. This was fascinating.
Yeah, I feel about 30 times smarter than when we started this interview.
I'm always happy to talk about my work. I'm glad when people find it interesting.
Nice. Well, thank you so much, man. We'll be in touch. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I feel 100 times smarter.
That's pretty crazy, man.
That's so fucking crazy.
Yeah, that's really interesting stuff. Thank you again to Brian for being so kind and patient and really walking us through a complex topic.
It's extremely complex and it's extremely interesting, and like there's so many facets to it, and I feel like we barely scratched the surface of it. But we'll of course put all the links to where you can find Brian, where you can buy his book.
Yep. Yeah, support Brian. Check out his books. Check out his other projects. And also, if you are looking for a researcher, an editor, a writer, you're looking to do some stuff in the tabletop space, hit Brian up. We'll link to his website. He does amazing work. Great guy to work with. So definitely check that out.
Also, just a nice dude.
Yeah, wonderful guy. Wonderful guy.
Anything else we got to go over? Or are we gonna get out of here?
I think let's get out of here, man.
All right, hell yeah. That's going to wrap up this broadcast for this evening. Thank you for listening. If you want to get in touch with us, you can hit us up at spookybriananderic@gmail.com or on Twitter at briananderic.pod. You can check out our blog at briananderic.show. I guess that's everything for both of us here at Brian and Eric Don't Belong Here. Thanks for listening, and stay safe out there.
Good night, everybody.